It was a quiet Saturday morning in a small suburban neighborhood. The sun was shining, birds were chirping, and the streets were mostly empty. A man in his late 30s, who had lived in the area for a few years, was getting ready to leave his house. He was a quiet, hard-working guy who kept to himself, but he was well-liked by his neighbors. He had just finished loading some tools into his truck for a weekend project and he noticed something unusual. A car was parked right in front of his driveway, blocking him from pulling out. At first, he thought it might be a delivery driver or someone who had stopped for a moment, but as the minutes passed, it became clear that the car wasn't moving. He walked over to take a closer look. The car was a sleek, expensive SUV, and the driver, a woman in her 40s, was sitting inside, scrolling through her phone. The man knocked lightly on the window to get her attention. She looked up, annoyed, and rolled down the window just enough to hear him. "Excuse me," he said politely, "you're blocking my driveway. I need to get my truck out." The woman didn't even look at him. "I'll just be a minute," she snapped, her tone dismissive. She went back to her phone, clearly not planning to move anytime soon. The man was taken aback. He wasn't used to dealing with such rudeness, especially in his own neighborhood. He tried again, this time a little firmer. "Ma'am, I really need to leave. Could you please move your car?" She sighed dramatically, as if he were the one inconveniencing her. "I said I'll be a minute. Can't you wait? It's not like you're going anywhere important." The man clenched his jaw but kept his cool. He didn't want to escalate the situation, but he also couldn't afford to be late. He decided to give her one more chance. "Look, I'm asking nicely. Please move your car so I can get out." The woman finally looked at him, her eyes narrowing. "You know what? I don't have to listen to you. I'll move when I'm ready, and not a second sooner." With that, she rolled up her window and turned up the volume on her music, effectively shutting him out. The man stood there for a moment, stunned by her audacity. He had never encountered someone so entitled and disrespectful. He knew he could call the police, but that would take time, and he didn't want to cause a scene in front of his neighbors. Instead, he decided to handle the situation himself, in a way that would teach her a lesson she wouldn't forget. He walked back to his house, his mind racing. He had an idea, but it would require some patience and careful planning. He grabbed his phone and started recording the scene, making sure to capture the woman's car, her license plate, and her blatant disregard for his request. He also took a few photos, just in case. As he waited, he couldn't help but wonder what had made her so entitled. Was it wealth? Privilege? Or just a complete lack of consideration for others? Whatever it was, he was determined to make sure she didn't get away with it. After about 20 minutes, the woman finally decided she was ready to leave. She started her car and began to back out of the driveway, but the man was ready. He stepped into the street, holding up his hand to stop her. "Hold on," he said calmly. "You blocked my driveway for over 20 minutes. I think you owe me an apology." The woman laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "An apology? For what? You're the one who's wasting my time. Move out of the way before I call the police." The man didn't budge. "Go ahead," he said. "I've already recorded everything. Let's see what they have to say about you blocking my driveway and refusing to move." For the first time, the woman looked unsure. She glanced at his phone, then back at him. "You're bluffing," she said, but her voice wavered. "Try me," he replied, his tone steady. The woman hesitated, then muttered something under her breath and drove off without another word. The man watched her go, knowing this wasn't over. He had a plan, and it was just getting started. As he got into his truck and finally left his driveway, he couldn't help but smile. He had no idea how far this would go, but one thing was certain, the woman had messed with the wrong person. And she was about to find out just how creative he could be when it came to standing up for himself. The man spent the rest of the day working on his project, but his mind kept drifting back to the incident. He couldn't shake the frustration and anger he felt. It wasn't just about being blocked in, it was the way the woman had treated him, as if he didn't matter. He knew he couldn't let it go. That evening, he sat down at his computer and started doing some research. He wanted to find out who the woman was and why she thought she could act that way. It didn't take long for him to discover that she lived just a few streets over. She was a well-known figure in the community, but not for good reasons. According to online forums and neighborhood gossip, she had a reputation for being rude, entitled, and difficult to deal with. The man's initial anger began to shift into something else, a determination to hold her accountable. He knew he couldn't change her behavior, but he could make sure she faced consequences for her actions. And he had just the idea to do it. The next morning, he printed out the photos he had taken and wrote a detailed account of what had happened. He also included the video he had recorded, making sure to edit out any unnecessary footage. Then, he went to the local community center, where a neighborhood meeting was scheduled for that afternoon. The meeting was a regular event where residents could discuss issues affecting the community. The man had never attended before, but he knew this was the perfect opportunity to bring attention to the woman's behavior. He arrived early and found a seat near the front, his folder of evidence tucked under his arm. As the meeting began, the man waited patiently for his turn to speak. When the time came, he stood up and introduced himself. "Good afternoon, everyone. I've lived in this neighborhood for a few years now, and I've always appreciated how friendly and respectful everyone is. But yesterday, something happened that I think we need to address." He went on to describe the incident, keeping his tone calm and factual. He didn't exaggerate or use emotional language, he simply laid out what had happened. Then, he showed the photos and played the video on the projector screen for everyone to see. The room fell silent as the footage played. People exchanged glances, some shaking their heads in disbelief. When the video ended, the man added, "This kind of behavior isn't just disrespectful, it's disruptive. If an emergency had happened and I needed to leave, I wouldn't have been able to. I think it's important that we hold each other accountable and make sure our neighborhood remains a place where everyone feels respected." The response was immediate. Several people spoke up, sharing their own experiences with the woman. It turned out she had a history of similar incidents, blocking driveways, parking in front of fire hydrants, and even yelling at neighbors who asked her to move. One elderly man recounted how she had once parked in his handicap spot and refused to move, even after he explained he needed it for his wheelchair. The man listened carefully, taking mental notes. He hadn't expected so many people to come forward, but it only strengthened his resolve. By the end of the meeting, the group had agreed to take action. They decided to draft a formal complaint to the Homeowners Association and request that the woman be fined for her repeated violations. But the man wasn't done yet. He had another idea, one that would make sure the woman thought twice before acting so entitled again. After the meeting, he approached a few neighbors who had been particularly vocal and asked if they'd be willing to help him with a small project. They agreed, intrigued by his plan. Over the next few days, the man and his neighbors worked together to create a series of flyers. They included a summary of the incident, along with a reminder about the importance of respecting shared spaces. The flyers were polite but firm, and they ended with a simple message: "Let's work together to keep our neighborhood a welcoming place for everyone." The man made sure to distribute the flyers to every house in the neighborhood, except the woman's. He didn't want to escalate the situation unnecessarily, but he wanted her to see that her actions had consequences. When the woman returned home from work a few days later, she found a stack of flyers on her doorstep. She picked one up, her face turning red as she read it. For the first time, she realized that her behavior wasn't just affecting one person, it was affecting the entire community. The man watched from a distance, a small smile on his face. He knew this wasn't the end of the story, but it was a good start. And he was ready for whatever came next. The woman's reaction to the flyers was exactly what the man had expected: anger, denial, and a refusal to take responsibility. She stormed through the neighborhood, ripping down the flyers wherever she found them. She even confronted a few neighbors, demanding to know who was behind the ridiculous campaign against her. But the man had anticipated this. He had made sure the flyers were anonymous, with no names or identifying details. The woman had no way of knowing who had organized the effort, and that only made her more furious. Meanwhile, the formal complaint to the homeowners association was gaining traction. The board reviewed the evidence and decided to take action. They sent the woman a letter, informing her that she had been fined for blocking driveways and violating community rules. They also warned her that further incidents could result in additional fines or even legal action. The woman was livid. She called the association, demanding to know who had filed the complaint. But the board refused to disclose any information, citing privacy policies. Frustrated and humiliated, she decided to take matters into her own hands. One evening, as the man was returning home from work, he noticed the woman's car parked near his house. She was standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, glaring at him as he pulled into his driveway. He took a deep breath, knowing this confrontation was inevitable. "You think you're clever, don't you?" she spat as he stepped out of his car. "Going behind my back, spreading lies about me. Who do you think you are?" The man remained calm, refusing to let her provoke him. "I didn't spread any lies," he said evenly. "Everything in those flyers and the complaint was true. You blocked my driveway, refused to move, and treated me with disrespect. I'm not the only one who's had problems with you." The woman's face turned red with rage. "You have no right to judge me. I don't care about your stupid rules or your little neighborhood club. I'll park wherever I want, and there's nothing you can do about it." The man shook his head. "You're wrong. This isn't just about me, it's about the entire community. We all have to live here, and that means respecting each other. If you can't do that, then you're going to keep facing consequences." The woman sneered. "We'll see about that." She turned on her heel and stormed back to her car, screeching out of the neighborhood in a cloud of exhaust. The man watched her go, feeling a mix of frustration and determination. He knew she wasn't going to back down easily, but neither was he. He had already started working on the next phase of his plan, one that would make it impossible for her to ignore the impact of her actions. The following weekend, the man organized a neighborhood cleanup event. He invited everyone in the community to come together and pick up litter, trim overgrown bushes, and make the area look its best. He also used the event as an opportunity to talk to his neighbors about the importance of mutual respect and cooperation. To his surprise, the turnout was huge. Dozens of people showed up, eager to contribute. Even those who had never had a problem with the woman were inspired by the sense of unity and shared purpose. As they worked, the man couldn't help but notice the woman watching from a distance. She stood on her porch, arms crossed, her expression a mix of curiosity and disdain. He wondered if she was starting to feel the pressure of being the only one who refused to be part of the community. By the end of the day, the neighborhood looked better than ever. The man thanked everyone for their hard work and reminded them that this was just the beginning. "We've shown what we can accomplish when we work together," he said. "Let's keep that spirit alive and make sure our neighborhood stays a place where everyone feels welcome." The crowd cheered, and the man felt a surge of pride. He knew the woman was still a problem, but he also knew she was outnumbered. The community was coming together, and that gave him hope. As he walked back to his house, he noticed the woman had gone inside. He wondered what she was thinking, whether she was starting to realize that her behavior was isolating her from the people around her. But he also knew she wasn't the type to admit she was wrong. If anything, the cleanup event might have made her even more determined to defy the community. The man sighed, knowing the battle wasn't over. But he was ready for whatever came next. He had the support of his neighbors, and that gave him the strength to keep fighting for what was right. The woman's defiance only grew stronger after the neighborhood cleanup event. She began parking her car in even more inconvenient places, across sidewalks, in front of mailboxes, and even in the middle of the street. It was as if she was daring someone to confront her. But the man and his neighbors had decided to take a different approach. Instead of engaging with her directly, they focused on building a stronger, more united community. They organized weekly potlucks, game nights, and even a small farmers market in the park. The goal was to create a sense of belonging that would make it harder for the woman to continue her disruptive behavior. The man also reached out to local authorities for advice. He learned that there were specific laws about blocking driveways and public spaces, and that repeated violations could result in more serious consequences. He documented every incident involving the woman, taking photos and videos to build a clear case against her. One day, the woman took things too far. She parked her car in front of a fire hydrant, completely blocking access. A neighbor who worked as a firefighter noticed and immediately reported it. Within minutes, a fire truck arrived, sirens blaring, to address the violation. The woman came running out of her house, furious. "What's going on? Why are you here?" she demanded. The firefighter calmly explained that blocking a fire hydrant was illegal and could put lives at risk in an emergency. "We're going to have to tow your car if you don't move it immediately," he said. The woman hesitated, clearly torn between her pride and the realization that she was in serious trouble. Reluctantly, she moved her car, but not without muttering a string of curses under her breath. The incident was a turning point. The man and his neighbors decided it was time to take their case to the next level. They compiled all the evidence they had gathered, photos, videos, witness statements, and even the firefighter's report, and submitted it to the local authorities. A few days later, the woman received a notice in the mail. She was being fined for multiple violations, and if she didn't change her behavior, she could face legal action. For the first time, the woman seemed shaken. She had always assumed she could get away with her behavior, but now she was facing real consequences. She stayed inside her house for days, avoiding her neighbors and refusing to answer the door. The man couldn't help but feel a little sorry for her. He didn't want to ruin her life, he just wanted her to understand that her actions affected others. But he also knew that sometimes, people needed a wake-up call to change. As the days passed, the neighborhood began to feel more peaceful. The woman's car was no longer a constant source of frustration, and the sense of unity among the neighbors grew stronger. But the man knew the story wasn't over yet. He had a feeling the woman wasn't done fighting, and he was prepared for whatever came next. The woman's absence from the neighborhood didn't go unnoticed. For weeks, she kept to herself, rarely leaving her house and avoiding any interaction with her neighbors. Her car, once a constant source of frustration, was now parked neatly in her driveway, untouched. The man and his neighbors wondered if the fines and the community's united front had finally made an impact. Some hoped she had learned her lesson, while others remained skeptical, convinced it was only a matter of time before she returned to her old ways. One evening, as the man was taking a walk through the neighborhood, he noticed a light on in the woman's house. He hesitated for a moment, then decided to take a chance. He walked up to her door and knocked gently. After a long pause, the door opened just a crack. The woman peered out, her expression guarded. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice sharp but lacking its usual bite. The man took a deep breath. "I just wanted to check on you," he said. "We haven't seen you around much lately, and I wanted to make sure you're okay." The woman looked surprised, as if she hadn't expected anyone to care. She opened the door a little wider but didn't invite him in. "I'm fine," she said curtly. "Just busy." The man nodded. "I understand. But if you ever need anything, or if you want to talk, we're here for you. This neighborhood is stronger when we all work together." The woman's eyes flickered with something, uncertainty, maybe even guilt. But she quickly masked it with her usual defensive tone. "I don't need your help," she said. "I've been just fine on my own." The man didn't push. He simply nodded again and said, "Okay. The offer stands, though. Have a good night." As he walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the woman's story than she let on. He wondered what had made her so defensive and isolated. Was it pride? Fear? Or something deeper? Over the next few days, the man noticed small changes. The woman started leaving her house more often, though she still avoided eye contact with her neighbors. She even began parking her car more carefully, making sure not to block driveways or sidewalks. One afternoon, the man saw her at the local grocery store. She was standing in the produce section, staring at a display of apples as if unsure what to do. He approached her cautiously, not wanting to startle her. "Those are the best ones," he said, pointing to a pile of crisp, red apples. "They're sweet but still firm." The woman glanced at him, then at the apples. "I don't know how to cook," she admitted quietly. "I've never really had to." The man smiled. "There's a first time for everything. If you want, I can give you a few easy recipes to try. Cooking can be fun once you get the hang of it." The woman hesitated, then nodded. "Maybe," she said. "Thanks." It was a small moment, but it felt significant. For the first time, the woman seemed willing to let her guard down, even if just a little. The man left the store feeling hopeful. He didn't know if the woman would ever fully change, but he believed everyone deserved a chance to start over. And maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to see that she didn't have to face the world alone. The woman's small interactions with the man and the neighborhood didn't go unnoticed. Over the next few weeks, she began to emerge from her self-imposed isolation, though her progress was slow and cautious. She started nodding at neighbors when she passed them on the street, and once, she even held the door open for an elderly woman carrying groceries. The man noticed these changes and felt a glimmer of hope. He knew real change took time, and he was willing to be patient. He continued to greet her warmly whenever he saw her, never pushing too hard but always leaving the door open for connection. One Saturday, the neighborhood held another community event, a small barbecue in the park. The man decided to take a chance and invite the woman. He walked up to her house, a plate of freshly grilled food in hand, and knocked on her door. She opened it cautiously, her eyes narrowing when she saw him. "What is it now?" she asked, though her tone lacked its usual sharpness. The man held up the plate. "We're having a barbecue in the park, and I thought you might like to join us. Or if you're not up for that, I brought you some food anyway. It's just a little something." The woman stared at the plate, then at him. For a moment, she seemed at a loss for words. Finally, she took the plate and muttered, "Thanks." The man smiled. "No problem. If you change your mind, we'll be there for a while. It's a nice day to be outside." He turned to leave, but before he could take a step, the woman spoke again. "Wait." He turned back, surprised. I might come by later," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just for a little while." The man's smile widened. "That'd be great. We'd love to have you." As he walked back to the park, he felt a sense of accomplishment. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was a step in the right direction. Later that afternoon, the woman did show up at the park. She stood at the edge of the gathering, holding the plate of food the man had brought her, looking unsure of herself. A few neighbors noticed her and waved, but no one pressured her to join in. The man approached her casually, holding a drink. "Glad you made it," he said. "How's the food?" She shrugged. "It's good. Thanks." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the kids play and the neighbors chat and laugh. Finally, the woman spoke again. "I don't really know how to do this," she admitted, gesturing to the crowd. The man nodded. "That's okay. You don't have to do anything. Just being here is enough." She gave him a small, hesitant smile, the first he'd ever seen from her. It was a start. As the afternoon turned into evening, the woman stayed longer than she probably intended. She didn't join in the conversations, but she listened, and once or twice, she even chuckled at a joke. When she finally left, the man felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He knew the road ahead would still be bumpy, but he believed the woman was beginning to see that she didn't have to be alone. And that, he thought, was worth every effort. The woman's appearance at the neighborhood barbecue marked a subtle but significant shift in her relationship with the community. Over the following weeks, she began to open up a little more, though her progress was slow and often hesitant. She still kept to herself most of the time, but she no longer glared at her neighbors or parked her car in disruptive ways. Instead, she started to observe, to listen, and to take small steps toward becoming part of the neighborhood. One day, the man noticed her outside her house, struggling to carry a large potted plant from her car to her porch. He walked over and offered to help. "Need a hand with that?" he asked. The woman looked surprised but nodded. "It's heavier than I thought," she admitted. Together, they carried the plant to her porch and set it down. The woman brushed her hands off and glanced at him. "Thanks," she said quietly. "No problem," the man replied. "That's a nice plant. Are you into gardening?" She shrugged. "I thought I'd try it. I don't really know what I'm doing, though." The man smiled. "I'm not an expert, but I've got a few plants at home. If you ever need tips, let me know." The woman hesitated, then nodded. "Maybe I will." It was a small exchange, but it felt like a breakthrough. For the first time, the woman seemed willing to accept help, and maybe even friendship. A few days later, the man was working in his front yard when he saw the woman walking by. She stopped and watched him for a moment before speaking. "What are you planting?" she asked. "Some flowers," he said, wiping his hands on his jeans. "They're supposed to attract butterflies. Want to see?" She stepped closer, looking at the small plants he had just put in the ground. "They're pretty," she said. "Do they need a lot of care?" "Not too much," he replied. "Just some water and sunlight. You could try planting some yourself if you're interested." The woman nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe I will." As the days turned into weeks, the woman began to take more of an interest in her surroundings. She started gardening, planting flowers and herbs in her front yard. She even asked the man for advice a few times, and he was happy to help. One evening, the neighborhood held a potluck dinner, and the woman surprised everyone by showing up with a dish of her own. It was a simple pasta salad, but the gesture meant a lot. The man greeted her warmly. "Glad you could make it," he said. "And you brought food. That's awesome." The woman smiled shyly. "It's nothing special, but I thought I'd contribute." As the evening went on, the woman stayed longer than she had at the barbecue. She even joined in a few conversations, sharing stories about her childhood and her travels. The neighbors listened with interest, and for the first time, the woman seemed to feel like she belonged. The man watched her with a sense of pride. He knew how hard it must have been for her to let her guard down and trust people. But he also knew that the effort was worth it. After the potluck, the woman approached him. "Thanks for everything," she said. "I know I haven't been the easiest person to get along with, but you've been kind to me. I appreciate that." The man smiled. "We're all just trying to figure things out," he said. "I'm glad you're here." The woman nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Me too." As she walked home that night, the man felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He knew the woman still had a long way to go, but she was making progress. And that, he thought, was what community was all about, helping each other grow, one small step at a time. The woman's transformation continued to unfold, one small step at a time. She began to attend more neighborhood events, often bringing dishes she had cooked herself. Her gardening skills improved, and her front yard became a colorful display of flowers and herbs that drew compliments from passers-by. She even started volunteering at the community center, helping to organize events and activities for the neighborhood kids. The man watched her progress with pride, knowing how far she had come. But he also knew that change wasn't always easy, and there were still moments when the woman struggled. One afternoon, the man was working in his yard when he saw the woman sitting on her porch, staring at her phone with a frustrated expression. He walked over and asked, "Everything okay?" The woman sighed. "I'm trying to figure out how to sign up for this online gardening class, but I can't seem to get it to work. Technology and I don't always get along." The man chuckled. "I can help with that. Mind if I take a look?" She handed him her phone, and he quickly navigated to the website. "Here's where you sign up," he said, pointing to the screen. "You just need to create an account first." The woman watched as he walked her through the process. "Thanks," she said when he handed the phone back. "I don't know what I'd do without you." The man smiled. "You'd figure it out. You're pretty resourceful." The woman smiled back, a genuine, warm smile that reached her eyes. "Maybe. But it's nice to have help." As the weeks went by, the woman became more involved in the community. She joined a book club, started a small composting project, and even helped organize a charity drive for a local shelter. Her neighbors, who had once seen her as a source of frustration, now saw her as a valuable member of the community. One evening, the neighborhood held a celebration to mark the end of a successful year of events and projects. The woman was asked to say a few words, and to everyone's surprise, she agreed. She stood in front of the crowd, clutching a piece of paper, and took a deep breath. "I know I haven't always been the easiest person to get along with," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I've made mistakes, and I've hurt people, and for that, I'm truly sorry." The crowd listened in silence, their expressions kind and understanding. "But I want to thank you all for giving me a chance," she continued. "For showing me that it's never too late to change, and that we're all stronger when we work together. This neighborhood has become my home, and all of you have become my family. Thank you for not giving up on me." When she finished, the crowd erupted into applause. The man felt a lump in his throat as he clapped along with everyone else. He knew how much courage it had taken for her to stand up there and share her story, and he was incredibly proud of her. After the celebration, the woman approached him. "Thank you," she said, her eyes shining with tears. "For everything. I wouldn't be here without you." The man shook his head. "You did this yourself. I just gave you a little nudge." The woman smiled. Well, it was a pretty good nudge. As they stood there, surrounded by their neighbors and friends, the man felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had set out to teach the woman a lesson, but in the end, he had learned just as much from her. He had learned about the power of patience, the importance of community, and the incredible strength it takes to change. And he knew that this was just the beginning. The woman's journey from being a disruptive outsider to a valued member of the neighborhood became a story of hope and transformation. Her willingness to change and the community's patience and support created a ripple effect that brought everyone closer together. The neighborhood, once divided by frustration, was now united by a shared sense of purpose and belonging. The man often reflected on how far they had all come. What had started as a simple act of standing up for himself had turned into something much bigger, a reminder that even the most difficult situations could be resolved with kindness, persistence, and a willingness to understand one another. One crisp autumn morning, the neighborhood gathered for a final event of the year, a harvest festival to celebrate the season and all they had accomplished together. The park was decorated with colorful banners, pumpkins, and hay bales. Tables were piled high with food, and children ran around laughing, their faces painted like animals and superheroes. The woman had taken on a leading role in organizing the festival. She had suggested the idea months earlier, and the community had embraced it wholeheartedly. Now, she moved through the crowd, greeting people with a smile and making sure everything ran smoothly. The man watched her from a distance, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. She had come so far, and so had the neighborhood. He walked over to her and said, "You've outdone yourself. This is amazing." She grinned. It was a team effort. I couldn't have done it without everyone's help. Still, he said, you've come a long way. You should be proud of yourself. She looked around at the bustling park, her expression thoughtful. I am. But I'm also grateful. Grateful for you, for everyone here, and for the chance to start over. The man nodded. We're grateful for you too. You've brought so much to this community. As the day went on, the festival became a celebration not just of the harvest, but of the bonds that had been forged over the past year. Neighbors who had once been strangers now laughed and chatted like old friends. The woman, once an outsider, was now at the heart of it all, her laughter ringing out as she played a game of cornhole with a group of kids. When it was time for the closing ceremony, the woman was asked to say a few words again. This time, she didn't hesitate. She stood in front of the crowd, her confidence shining through. This has been an incredible year, she began. We've faced challenges, but we've also come together in ways I never thought possible. I've learned that it's never too late to change, and that a little kindness can go a long way. Thank you all for being part of this journey with me. Here's to many more years of growing together. The crowd cheered, and the man felt a surge of emotion. He knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter for the neighborhood, one filled with hope, unity, and the promise of brighter days ahead. As the festival wound down and the sun began to set, the man and the woman stood side by side, watching the kids chase each other through the park. You know, she said, I used to think I didn't need anyone. But now I can't imagine my life without this community. The man smiled. That's what it's all about. We're stronger together. She nodded, her eyes shining with gratitude. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for not giving up on yourself, he replied. As they stood there, surrounded by the warmth and laughter of their neighbors, the man knew that they had all been changed for the better. The woman's journey had taught them the power of forgiveness, the importance of second chances, and the incredible strength of a united community. And as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, the man felt a deep sense of peace. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but he knew they would face them together, stronger, kinder, and more connected than ever before.